I don't think the Israelis have nearly gotten to the point where they've accomplished any of those goals
Yes.
right now.
So,
And Hamas's objective is clear, which is to survive and to trade the 136 hostages, 20 of whom the Israelis assess, as do the Americans, that were either killed on October 7th, their bodies taken to Gaza to trade, or died in captivity. To trade hostages, living and dead, for a cessation of hostilities. That's what Hamas wants, to be able to say at the end of this war that it has survived the onslaught of the Middle East's most formidable military power and survived. They will trade hostages, probably all of them, if they could get that cessation of hostilities.
Aaron, tell me, what is Antony Blinken trying to achieve on this visit, do you believe?
You know, I've traveled with a half a dozen secretaries of state. No single visit, certainly in the fraught circumstances that now exist, is going to produce anything that you and I would describe as a breakthrough. He's working with at least 4 or 5 issues. Number one, checking to see whether or not Israel really is on track to fundamentally alter the nature of their ground campaign in an effort to reduce, if not eliminate, Palestinian deaths. And number two, to create the sort of time and space in which humanitarian assistance, which is now dribbling into Gaza, but which needs to surge into Gaza, can take place. Those are 2 critically important issues. A third issue, of course, is escalation. The message of the secretary is de-escalation. Here, I think it's hard to, I think, argue that he's going to be talking to anybody on his visit, his previous stops in the Gulf, with the exception of Israel. Whether or not we escalate into what you and I would describe as a major regional war, and we're now 4 months into this war without such a escalation, depends on 3 parties. 4 if you add the United States. Number one, it depends on Israeli motives and their agenda. Number 2, what the Iranians are trying to achieve. And number 3, Hezbollah. Right now, it seems to me that none of these parties, despite the bold talk by all of them, including the Israelis, are interested in a major confrontation along the Israeli-Lebanese border, which could easily escalate. We could wind up with a U.S. involved campaign in which the Israelis and the Americans are striking Iranian assets, IRGC, or even directly Iran proper, and spreading to the Gulf as well. Nobody wants that. I don't think Hezbollah and Iran's objective is the same: to fight Israel to the last Palestinian. And frankly, right now, Hamas is doing their bidding for them.
It is a worrying thought. We could end up with a major escalation, although no party to the dispute, to the war, is actively aiming to do that. But it could happen anyway. Part of America's and other allies' aim is to prevent Palestinians being forcibly displaced by Israel. The US, among others, have said that must not happen. But how is that to be ensured, David? How can America or anyone else stop that from happening?
First of all, I think the chances of that happening, and I don't want to underestimate Palestinian fears and suspicions and their concerns. How could they not be concerned when you have 2 of the most extremist ministers in Mr. Netanyahu's government openly not just talking about it, but encouraging it, and encouraging the return of Israelis and Israeli settlements in Gaza, from which Ariel Sharon, as you know, in 2005, withdrew Israeli defense forces and dismantled settlements. It's my own sense that as long as you have the war cabinet, which includes former Minister of Defense Benny Gantz and members of his party, that the odds that the government of Israel would actively pursue as a government, forget ministerial statements, pursue this policy over and above American objectives. Let's forget the international community for a minute. I think that's highly unlikely. Highly unlikely that you'll see that sort of forced expulsion using Israeli military forces as an agent. I think that's highly unlikely. The fears on the West Bank, however, have been energized by realities. Over 1,000 Palestinians, whole shepherding communities, have been dislodged from their land as a consequence of the intimidation and use of force in some cases by settlers. So, I mean, I think that is a fear. It's a problem. I don't want to trivialize it.
Yes.
But I don't think it's going to become a matter of governmental policy.
Oh, interesting view. I mean, it's commonly said this war could endure for months. I wonder, what do you think it will realistically take to end this conflict?
Well, if by this conflict you mean to accomplish Israel's military goals,
I suppose to
and
end the war, to end the exchange of missiles and drones, to end the fighting and the killing.
I think, well, if you could end the fighting in Gaza, then I think you're going to be left. You're still going to be left with the problem of how 80,000 Israelis displaced from their homes in the north can return as long as you have an active Hezbollah presence along the border. That's a separate problem that the administration is working on. Look, Israel has three objectives: degrade, eradicate, destroy, degrade Hamas's military infrastructure above and below ground. The Israelis have broken command and control of Hamas in northern Gaza. There are several thousand fighters left, but they may have killed 8,000 or more, and they've broken command and control. They're now operating in central and southern Gaza. Number two, kill its senior leaders. And number three, free the hostages. I don't think the Israelis have nearly gotten to the point where they've accomplished any of those goals right now. And Hamas's objective is clear, which is to survive and to trade the 136 hostages, 20 of whom the Israelis assess, as do the Americans, that were either killed on October 7th, their bodies taken to Gaza to trade, or died in captivity. To trade hostages, living and dead, for a cessation of hostilities. That's what Hamas wants, to be able to say at the end of this war that it has survived the onslaught of the Middle East's most formidable military power and survived. They will trade hostages, probably all of them, if they could get that cessation of hostilities. Should they present that offer to the government of Israel, I think the Israelis would have a very difficult time not accepting it.
That's really a fascinating analysis and such a bleak prospect. Aaron David Miller, thank you.